and welcome back to Room 303 in AP English. We turn now in our study of Shakespeare's great plays to the last of his great plays, that is to say, The Tempest, 1611. Many argue it is his last play, and the character of Prospero we'll talk about is possibly Shakespeare. Here, of course, in The Tempest, we have Miranda's famous line, "Brave New World." Huxley, of course, will write a novel predicated on this line. What is it a play about? Well, it's a play about storms. How we start them, how we perpetrate them, how we perpetuate them, how we endure them, and finally, how we escape them. Now, there are a few assumptions, just to be clear before we begin here. If you haven't been following our stuff on learnstrong.net, very much recommend that you get there, get to the AP folder, especially our introductions to Shakespeare and biography, because I'm not going to say much about that, although we are going to talk about at the very ending of the play. By the way, just think about that date, 1611, and go and look at our already lectures posted on the 1611 King James Version of the Bible. An important year, 1611, because we will have that most important of texts for English language and literature, the King James Version of the Bible, and then here we will have this really amazing play. Other assumptions for us that I'm working off of is that you know our learning theory, that desire to connect new information to old information in meaningful ways. Again, we'll be processing through our 3 levels of reading. Level 1, what does the text say? Summary. Level 2, what does the text mean? 2A, themes, messages. 2B, we're working at rhetoric and the rhetorical level there. And here we'll concentrate on symbolism and irony as we finish our lecture. Finally, at level 3, how can I relate to this text in some way? At 3A, relating it to other titles. And we're going to make some interesting observations. We're going to argue that it's a very interesting trajectory to work from Eden and the Genesis 3 story, to Tempest, the 1611 story, to Milton's Paradise Lost, 1667. Think about your dates there. And then finally to Golding's 20th century classic, Lord of Flies. We'll have more to say about this as we finish. And finally at 3B, how can I relate to this information at a personal level? We'll also engage in our big five, as we sometimes refer to it in AP. What does this text say about epistemology, what you can know? Ontology, understandings of who you are. Psychology, the way the individual mind works. And sociology, the way the group of minds work. As well as the question of theodicy. That is to say, why is there bad stuff that happens in this world? And is there any sense of justice in this world? We'll come to all of those. The other assumption here before we begin, is my hope, is that you have read the play on your own. You've been exposed to it, you've watched it, you've read it, and now you're coming to the comments here as a way to help you understand the play. We're going to work through a brief summary, and then we'll go to our final observations. Let's go ahead now and just briefly summarize the play, The Tempest. It is, no shock here, we begin with a storm, right? Okay, we begin with the storm, we end with calm. And in that regards, it does fit this topography of Shakespearean comedy. We are going to, of course, end with a wedding as well. We're going to meet some characters on a boat. They're stuck on a boat. We're going to learn the King of Naples is here. Several of his attendants are with him. And we're going to hear that things are not going well. They're about to drown, maybe to fall out of the boat, drown. And all they can do is pray. The boat's going to split in half, and we're going to have people floating off into the sea. Now, we'll think immediately at 3A, we'll think immediately of how many times this is a motif in classic epic poetry. We think immediately of Odysseus and his, trying to escape Poseidon and all of that, and ending up on the island of the Phaeacians. Well, we'll think as well of Aeneas and his journeys across boats and storms at the beginning of the Aeneid, right? A storm. And then we're going to change scenes. We're going to move now to land and to Prospero. Now here's our main character. He's going to be talking with his daughter Miranda. We're going to learn a whole lot of backstory here real quickly, okay? We're going to learn that Prospero is a magic man. He's a wizard, and he, using this magic, has caused this tempest that sank the boat. And he has good reason for doing it, good cause for doing it as well. He promises, however, his daughter, who is very sweet, the model of innocence, Miranda, that nobody was hurt, it's all fine, and there won't be any drowning happening. Prospero will then tell Miranda that it's time she knows a little about her own background. Okay, so very much like these ancient motifs where you grow up and you don't know really everything. We think immediately of Arthur here. Everything about your background, he tells her, you know, really, he says, I used to be the Duke of Milan and you're my daughter. That makes you a princess. But my bro, Antonio, betrayed me. He stole the dukedom, right, with the consent of the king. And there's an interesting backstory here. One of the reasons this happened is because Prospero was always spending all of his time reading and studying and learning magic in his library and not paying attention to governing. After all of the usurping Prospero and the 3-year-old Miranda, they were shuttled out onto the ocean and put in a boat and left to die. They didn't die, they ended up on the island. And the ex-duke here raised his daughter, right, for 12 years. Okay? That is to say now, what's going to happen next, right? He says that a star is a lucky star, is in the sky, and for Prospero, it's time to set things right. Now, put it in your notes. This is going to be a play about justice. No question. We're going to come back to our study of Plato and especially Republic. You can go and look again at those lectures at learnstrong.net in the AP folder. What is justice? What is harmony? And how do we achieve it? And what happens if we don't achieve it? And so, this is going to be a play about justice and, of course, to some degree, a play about revenge as well. Somebody's got to get theirs, and immediately we'll think of 3A of a text like Hamlet, okay? We then are going to meet a couple of servants. One is this amazing, beautiful, delicate, airy kind of spirit who was imprisoned in a tree by a witch for a long time. And the name of this little fairy is Ariel. And then we're going to have another one, which is the child of this witch, named Caliban. Now put it in your notes. Caliban will become one of the interesting characters of Shakespeare, often referred to as the prototype of the noble savage, or the individual who is lost to civilization and to society by virtue of poor education and the like. Obviously, of the two, we're going to see that Prospero favors Ariel. Okay? We're going to learn that mostly all of the people who are responsible for causing Prospero's life to become what it has become on this island are all in that boat that was sinking at the beginning of the play, right? And now they're all over the island, and the rest of the play ostensibly is going to be a kind of hit and miss game with all these different characters on the island. First of all, Alonso. He's the king who allowed Antonio, nasty Antonio, to take Prospero's dukedom. He will fear that he's lost his son, the prince, in the storm. That's going to be an important moment. The shipwreck group will be Alonso, Antonio, Alonso's brother Sebastian, and a few other people. And all of them set off to find Alonso's son, the lost prince, Ferdinand. Okay. Meanwhile, this Ferdinand is alive, and he is convinced that everybody else has died from the shipwreck. So notice already, epistemologically, what you can know. Notice some assumptions will be made, very much like Shakespearean comedy often is the case. Assumptions will be made that are in fact flawed on some level. Okay. And in the meantime, he bumps into Prospero and Miranda. Now, put this in your notes. We're going to mess around with the whole love at first sight gig that we studied when we did our Romeo and Juliet study. And sure enough, they meet. They fall in love very, very quickly. Everything's going to be compressed, right? Now, Prospero is interesting. He's going to accuse this prince of being a traitor, and he puts Ferdinand through the paces. Lots of hard work, tasks like carrying wood or whatever. He gives him menial jobs to do. We think about the biblical account of Jacob and his longing for Rachel and has to work 7 years for Leah and then for Rachel. Same kind of gig is going on. It's pretty clear that Prospero is actually pleased with Ferdinand and the kind of young man that he is, which is why later he's going to approve of a wedding between his daughter and Ferdinand. Ferdinand has no problem whatsoever doing these duties as long as he gets to see Miranda and they can make eyes at each other. Ferdinand will learn Miranda's name and he promises to marry her. She will declare her love for him. Although, to be honest, there's only been just her father who she's ever really seen before. And of course Caliban, the son of the devil, right? Meanwhile, the search party is continuing to look for the prince, and everyone obviously is extremely fatigued and saddened that they believe Ferdinand is dead. And then all of a sudden there's this banquet that appears in front of the shipwrecked group. It's all set up by the fairy spirits, and then all of a sudden as they're getting ready to eat, a harpy, a scary monster, a harpy shows up and will make them all run away. A result, obviously, of Prospero, the magic that's being played on them. In some ways, this is the form of the revenge. In other words, you want to mess with me, now I'm going to mess with you, right? The harpy also points out that there are 3 traitors at the table, and this traitor side then will bring us to another plot. Antonio, Sebastian, thinking that Ferdinand is dead, are now plotting to murder Alonso so that Sebastian can become king. And we know this from its tragic instantiation in plays like Macbeth, don't we? Of course, Alonso is Sebastian's brother, but still, I mean, we got the same game getting played, right? Antonio, you could call him psychopathic in some ways. I mean, he has no sense at all that he's lost his bro. All he cares about is power. That he does admit, Antonio does admit that he is troubled by stealing Prospero, his brother's dukedom. And so we've got now some disequilibrium, cognitive disequilibrium about what he has done. The monster harpy is back. Alonso is disturbed, repents of his foul deed. Sebastian and Antonio, though, will not repent. They are not ready to, quote-unquote, learn their lesson. We come back to the other group on the island. Prospero now will accept Ferdinand, saying that he's just kind of, trying the young man out, testing him with all that hard labor. And the prince has been carrying heavy wood and doing other kinds of activities. And since that's the case, he now has permission to marry Miranda. Then we have another side story going on this island. Caliban. Well, he hasn't been treated always very well by Prospero. And so he's plotting with this drunken butler of the king, Stefano, and the jester, Tranquillo, also drunk, to murder Prospero so they can take over and rule the island. All right? Caliban will say that he wants to be Stefano's slave. He kisses his feet. The schemers who are drunk then are going to be led by Ariel and her music. Ariel leaves the group in a nasty smelling pool. Think of it as a kind of toilet. Ardante will come to mind here. That is to say, in a nasty pool. And then ultimately they get out of the yucky pool and they set off to murder Prospero. Prospero obviously knows. He kind of hunts them down and makes them all run off. Eventually they do come back. They get made fun of. And Caliban ultimately will repent and say that, in fact, he will serve Prospero if Prospero will have him back. Prospero then will go on to then be introduced to the king as well as to all the others. And the harpy who really messed with the king is there. So Alonso will apologize to Prospero and will return his dukedom. It's at this point now that we begin to have the end of the play, and we will have some resolutions that will begin to happen. Now, Prospero doesn't immediately tell the king of Antonio and Sebastian's manipulative treachery, but neither of the traitors will apologize or repent at all. And think of Iago in this regards at the end of the play Othello. In other words, they haven't, it seemed, learned the lesson that one is supposed to learn on this island when Prospero starts doing what Prospero does. Prospero, however, will begin some banter about how he recently lost his daughter to the Tempest as well, commiserating with the king. Prospero then will change the subject and ask if they'd like to see his cell, the place where he lives. And very famous here, he pulls back the curtain and he sees in there, he shows in there the 2 young people, and they're playing chess. Interestingly, they're in love. By the way, put this in your notes at 3A. We're going to come to this scene when we study our T.S. Eliot's Wasteland, so make a note to yourself. Obviously, Alonso is very pleased to see Ferdinand. Ferdinand, obviously, very, very happy to show off Miranda, his girl. And Miranda, at this moment will give the famous line when she sees all the men, "Oh, brave new world that has such people in it," one of the classic lines of the play. Prospero, of course, is the one in control of this play, and he promises to explain everything. Tonight, he's going to then tell the story of his life, and then everybody is going to go back to Naples in the morning in ships. Prospero says that he wants to see the young people married, and then he's going to retire and be done back in his dukedom. He wants to live out his life in peace. That's a central motif for Prospero. He will charge Ariel to make sure the ships get to Naples safely. He frees Ariel from ever having to serve anyone again. And as well, you get the sense that Caliban gets to return back to the way that Caliban is going to respond. The final lines of the play are important, and scholars have pointed out for a long time, these lines have to be really appreciated. Because if you read it all, Prospero, and it's not hard to do so, as a prototype of Shakespeare himself, then there's some interesting words about freedom and the like. What are the last lines that we believe Shakespeare ever wrote for the stage? Well, here they are, the final lines. He's speaking, and he will say to Alonso, "I'll deliver all." Now, this is the end of the play. "And promise you calm seas, auspicious gales, and sails so expeditious that shall catch your royal fleet far off." And then he will turn to Ariel and say, "My Ariel, chick, that is thy charge. Then do the elements be free." It's interesting the way the word free gets used in this play. Just hear it now several times. "And fare thou well, please you, draw near." And then we have the epilogue spoken by Prospero. Ostensibly, it is a soliloquy. The final thing that Shakespeare will write will be in the form of a soliloquy. And it's fascinating to take a soliloquy like this and to put it alongside a 3A observation. With Hamlet's soliloquies of Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 of Hamlet, just pay attention now to this final epilogue comments. Speaking directly to the audience, Prospero, maybe Shakespeare says, "Now my charms are all o'erthrown, and what strength I have's mine own, which is most faint. Now 'tis true I must be here confined by you or sent to Naples. Let me not, since I have my dukedom got, and pardoned the deceiver, dwell in this bare island by your spell, but release me from my bands with the help of your good hands. Gentle breath of yours my sails must fill, or else my project fails, which was to please. Now I want spirits to enforce, art to enchant, and my ending is despair unless I be relieved by prayer, which pierces so that it assaults mercy itself and frees all faults. As you from crimes would pardoned be, let your indulgence set me free." I love that the very last word for the stage, we believe anyway, that Shakespeare ever wrote was the word free. And as we have commented many times in 303 about the great works of Shakespeare, it is in fact a project of freedom, a project of inspection, of introspection, as we've said many times when we studied as well our Plato. It's a project of perspicacity, insight, not outsight. I can see you sitting there, that's outsight, but insight, that ability not to roll your eyes into the back of your head and see the back of your head, your brain. No. Insight, wisdom, right? And of course with wisdom, humility, the quest for freedom. Now, let's finish with some interpretive comments beginning with our big five. First of all, epistemologically, what can you know? What does this play have to say? Well, one more time, put it in your notes. This is huge. We learned this in our study of Dante's Divine Comedy, especially the Inferno. Here we hear it again. Knowledge is limited. You can't know everything. And the moment you think you are absolutely certain about what's going on the island, no, actually it was something quite different. Our knowledge is limited, what we have called the fallibilist position, epistemologically speaking. The absolutist position is silly, because the moment you think you know everything is the moment that usually something really tragic happens. Of course, the extreme position, the relativist position in the opposite direction, is also silly. To say there is no absolute truth is to posit a truth, the performative contradiction. Well, where does one stand epistemologically? This play says, in the middle, the fallibilist position. You're not totally sure. You say about the position epistemologically you hold, I think I'm right, but I could be wrong. Of course, that fallibus position, and this is huge for this play, will almost always lead to humility, and that's an important element as well. What does this play say about ontology? Well, it says a lot about the types of humans. Notice you have your Caliban type, the natural, the savage man, the one that's somehow outside of civilization. You have Miranda, the one who is a model of perfect innocence, oh brave new world. You have, of course, in Prospero, a very interesting kind of personality type, the one who is trying to control, trying to learn how to forgive when he has been harmed. Psychologically, since that's where we're headed, let's go there. This play does speak a lot about Prospero's psychic need to learn, and that's the key word, right, in this play. This is a play, in my estimation, it's a play about education. I've often said that I think all teachers and would-be teachers need to read this play. What is it about education? Well, he learns how to forgive, how to let go. I mean, you heard it in those final lines, to be free. Sociologically, well, think about the ways in which we have a situation or dynamic that we can study rather well. I mean, again, notice the sociological questions. The Iliad comes to mind as well as Lord of Flies. What happens when you put a bunch of people together on an island and kind of watch how they will learn, either deteriorate or not deteriorate? Lord of the Flies, a classic example, companion read to this. It does allow for a very interesting study of sociology. And finally, the theodictic question, that is to say, why is there bad stuff, and is there such a thing as justice in the world, and is everything ultimately, all the evil finally corrected? Here, notice, it almost ends in the form of a rhetorical question for Prospero in his final epilogue. But there seems to be some sense that I'm laying down my pen, I'm done, it's over, and I hope that you will allow me to leave. At 2a, well, when we're talking messages, themes, we got to start with the title, Tempest itself. There are so many different storms, obviously, in this play. How are they started? How are they continued, perpetuated? And finally, how do you get through to the end? Think about these messages. Life is really about learning to forgive and moving on. You can't hold on to the rage in your life forever.